Good evening. It is lovely to welcome you to Questions of Life. It is Wednesday night. It is raining outside, which is quite typical for the British weather. But this evening, I'm Cath. I'm joined by Donald.
Hi, I've got my sunny shirt
You've got
on.
your sunny shirt on, and I'm joined by Shrade as well. And we are hoping to bring a little bit of sunshine and lightness into your lives this evening. Now, tonight, we're looking at the subject of forgiveness. How do we forgive other people? How do we forgive ourselves? It's quite a big and a complex subject. And one of the things that we would love is for you to get in touch with the questions that you have about this, and maybe some comments and some experiences as well. We've already had a question in this evening, and we will weave that into our session. But if you want to get in touch, there are two ways that you can do that. The first is that you can email us. Donald, what is our email address?
qol@scbc.org.uk.
Hopefully you're seeing this on the screen as well. And Donald, what is the text number?
The text number is 0754 489 9698.
Beautifully read. So do get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. Now, these past few weeks, there's been so much going on in the news, and there's been probably two main stories that have dominated. The first has been the whole Dominic Cummings going to Durham, going to the castle. And because he didn't come out and say, yes, I've done the wrong thing, I'm sorry, forgive me, there seems to have been this huge anger and outcry from the public. And so that's just rumbled on and on and on, because there hasn't been this sense of admitting guilt and of being able to forgive and to move on with it. And then if we look at what is going on in America at the moment, and that is huge. The loss of one man's life in just horrific circumstances. Some sections of America saying it was justified, others ignoring it, wanting to have nothing to do with it. And then another section just incensed, saying we need to stand up for the rights of people. These people need to know that they've done something wrong, that they are guilty. And one of the things that really struck me was watching something on social media last night. And it was a police force that had come out of their building, and they were amongst a crowd of demonstrators. And these demonstrators were all black and were saying that Black Lives Matter. And the police force did something that was just incredible. They walked out en masse, and they got down on one knee, and they asked for the forgiveness of those that were there. They said, would you forgive us for what we've done, for what's going on at the moment, for the way that you've been treated, and for the way that our ancestors have been treated. And I thought that was incredible. And it makes me think about this whole area of forgiveness, that there are so many different facets to it. We could talk about Dominic Cummings, we could talk about America, we could talk about our own lives, and I suspect for many of us we have experienced things that have hurt us. And so we could look at, well, how do we forgive people? How do we forgive those that are sorry for what they've done? How do we forgive those that show no remorse? If we forgive, does that mean that we're weak? How do we go about doing it? Do we have to trust people again? There's so many different facets to forgiveness, which is one of the reasons why we really want people to text in and to ask us questions, because there might be something really specific within this that they want us to talk about. But to begin with, Donald, just explain for us, what is forgiveness?
It's a huge subject, so I'm glad we've got the whole evening. And I think just the thing that strikes me, and why I think this is such an important subject, before we get on to answering that question, is that I think arguably you could make a case for saying that the three greatest human beings of the last century, or at least in the three in the top 10, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. And what they all had in common was that they were focused on how to build a peace that lasted between human beings, rather than on how to get revenge.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this whole subject is important in terms of Dominic Cummings, in terms of Black Lives Matter, because where there has been wrongdoing, we need to find a way not to perpetuate wrongdoing and not to pay wrong with wrong.
Yep.
And that's why this whole issue is really important. So, and we'll come back to those kind of things and what those three men taught and what they lived by their lives and stuff. So what is forgiveness? I think it's really important to define forgiveness by what it isn't.
Right.
It is not excusing. You can't forgive someone if you don't think they've done something wrong. So the first basis of forgiveness is to say what you did to me or to somebody I love or somebody I value or what you've done to society was wrong. No excuses, it was wrong.
Some people find it hard to recognise that, though, don't they? I think sometimes people get sucked into a pattern of behaviour and you think it's the norm, and sometimes they don't realise that maybe they've been mistreated until
Yes.
some way down the track.
Yes.
But that's a really important starting
Yes.
point, isn't it?
Yes. You have to be able to say, I shouldn't have been treated that way.
Yes.
Or my loved one or my friend or my
Yes.
community should not have been treated. That breaks the values of God's kingdom, and it was wrong.
Yep.
So we have to start at that point of saying that forgiveness is not excusing. And from then, we're talking about choosing, not necessarily feeling, but choosing rationally to not perpetuate and take revenge and to not pay hurt back, but to in some way choose to let go of a desire and a constant thinking about how we're going to hurt someone.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the same as choosing to press charges.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone has been wronged and the law of the land has been broken, it's right to protect other people by choosing to say, look, I do need to press charges because this person needs to understand the consequences of what they've done.
Yep.
And maybe other members of the community need to be protected from them and they need to learn about this. So forgiveness is not the same as saying there's no consequence, but it's something internal rather than something community-wide. So it's something I choose to do myself about my feelings towards that person. Mm-hmm. And it's about choosing to let go, as I said, about how I'm going to get them back, or choosing to let go of trying to hurt them, and beginning to think through what will help them.
Yeah.
And that's where you move into the territory of beginning to love our enemies, which is another part of this, but another big area. It's not about feelings, but it's about making decisions that might help a person who's wronged us rather than try and hurt them back.
Do you think the most natural instinct in the human race isn't to forgive? Do you think it's that initial, I've been hurt, I don't like you, I'm going to hold on to that and I want to seek revenge? Do you think that's a more, not natural, but a more common response, I suppose, in our world, rather than I want to choose to forgive?
I think there are two common things. One is the one you said earlier, which is to say I deserve it and to accept it.
Yep.
And that is not right. And the other is to say, I'm angry and I'm going to pay you back. And anger in itself isn't necessarily the wrong response. Sometimes anger is a necessary thing. It's what we do with that anger. I definitely think that it's not easy, and that for the really difficult things, it becomes something that we definitely need God's help for. It becomes supernatural.
Yeah.
That when we're talking about huge things, we will probably need God's help. And we probably need to, and it becomes a process. It's not an instant feeling, and it's not something that you just immediately say, oh yes, I forgive someone.
Yeah.
It's normally a journey that becomes a set of decisions that we ask God to help us with. So yeah, it's not easy and it's not natural.
What would you say are some of the detrimental aspects of holding on to unforgiveness? Because it's not always helpful for those of us that hold on to it. What would you say the difficulties are with that?
I think there are loads. Firstly, in terms of a big scale, we just perpetuate conflict and hurt and damage. So most wars are built on previous hurts that people, groups and nations have against each other that perpetuate for generation after generation and just kill more people and damage more people. So paying someone back never finishes it, never resolves it, never brings peace. It just brings the other person paying us back. So the escalation, it's the old saying, is an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth leaves everyone blind and toothless.
Never heard that.
Have you never heard that? So that's not my... That's
great.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So there's that sense. The second thing is that it damages us internally.
Yeah.
So instead of us moving on, we get stuck constantly replaying in our mind the video of the hurt that's been caused to us. And so actually we constantly re-hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the more and more we're thinking about this person, how they've made us a victim, how they've spoilt our life, how they've ruined us, the more we can't move away from being that victim and that person that's been damaged.
Yeah.
So it becomes a self-made box that we're trapped in.
Yeah.
And we can't move through into peace. So that when we're holding on to hurt, by holding on to anger, by holding on to bitterness, we can't find peace. Thirdly, when we are consumed with anger and unforgiveness, we push other people away and we become more isolated. Because what most other people begin to feel is, gosh, they're that angry about that, they're going to turn on me soon. And in fact, that does happen, that when we hold on to anger and bitterness against one person, it spills over, and we're soon angry and bitter with other people, and we're angry and bitter with people who don't take our side, who don't agree with us, who don't support our point of view. And people who are captured by bitterness are not easy to get on with. And we all can see that in others, but it's hard to see in ourselves. And they become very unattractive as people. They become people who, as I say, push other people away.
Yeah.
Whereas people of grace, people of compassion, people of understanding, which are all the other sides of this word of not forgiving, are people who we want to be in the company of because we feel safer.
Yeah.
So we don't feel safe with a person who we know is holding on to something. I think fourthly, and maybe you can stop me because I'm going on too long. I think
great.
Fourthly, I think there is clear medical
Yeah.
and physical results from not forgiving. That it increases our blood pressure and our stress and our tension and our anxiety, and that has a medical detriment to us. It's not good for our health.
Yeah.
And somehow we need to get through to a place where we don't forget what was done to us, but the wound is healing and it is no longer as raw, and we're at a place where it's not constantly in our mind, where it's not triggered by things, and where we ultimately can move on.
Yeah.
One of the things I should say right at the early outset is that forgiveness, when you ask me what forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation, and we need to explore that as well.
Yeah.
That we're not saying that you have to be the best friend or to resume or return to a relationship with someone. I can forgive someone who I choose never to see again.
Yep.
In fact, it may be the right thing to choose to never see them again.
Yep.
So it's not the same as being reconciled. That's a different thing. But it is letting go of what I feel about them.
I think it's so important to begin to let go. I think throughout my upbringing into my teens, I went through a lot that wasn't right. And I think I was one of those people, because I grew up with it, I just assumed it was normal. And it wasn't until I moved away from home that it dawned on me that I hadn't had a normal upbringing. But one of the things that I did was I just buried it deep within. And I kind of shut myself off from people around me, so I wouldn't let them get close because I didn't want to be hurt, because I had all of this emotion that was still in me. And sometimes I was able to keep a lid on it, but other times it was just too much, and it would come out in different ways that were often unhelpful. And I remember having a conversation with someone probably about 25 years ago. And I remember them saying, when I first met you, I was about 16, and they said, you were just deeply unhappy. That you were just shut off, you were hard, but you were very, very unhappy. And the person that I see today is an incredibly different person. Now, I hadn't realized that that's how I was, because I thought I was normal. I'm not normal, we both know that. But I hadn't realized the effect that it had on me. And throughout my teenage years and my 20s, I was blighted with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And you put it all together and you think, it's just not what God intended for us to hold on to all of this, that it's enough to be hurt. That's horrible in itself, but to hold on to it perpetuates it. And I think God wants to set us free. Whatever it is that we've been through, it may be the most tragic and horrific of circumstances. I think the really encouraging news is that God is big enough and capable over time, and with us working with him, to begin to set us free from the past so that we're not defined by it, so that we're not affected by it. And that's the fantastic news. And Jesus came and he said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And Jesus kind of demonstrates that it is possible to forgive anybody. Do you want to talk a little bit about him on the cross and what he said about forgiveness and how that marked the way that he treated people in his life?
Yes, yeah. So when he's on the cross, they shout at him, some of the people that have put him on the cross, they say, look, if you're the Son of God, come down, save yourself. And they mocked him. They've already whipped him. They've already put a crown of thorns on his head. And he says these words, Father, forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. That doesn't create any response from them.
Yeah.
And they carry on with that till he dies.
Yeah.
So he isn't waiting for they're not asking him to forgive them. He forgives them before. He's preemptive in his forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I believe that forgiveness is preemptive. We offer it first.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will change people's lives. Sometimes it won't.
Yeah.
But that's not our story. Our story is what we choose to do. What they choose to do is what they choose to do with it. And one of the most powerful things that Jesus talks about is if somebody wrongs you, somebody hits you, turn the other cheek. Now that's such a controversial thing to say. But he modeled it. He lived it out. And Mandela, Gandhi, Martin Luther King lived out those words and made far more impact than any man of violence did. Yeah. And so that it works.
So the encouraging thing for me is that we are following a God who isn't just sitting up in heaven having never experienced the things that we go through, but who came to earth, who was treated horrifically, and yet has shown us that forgiveness is possible, which again means he's in the best possible place to understand, to help, to guide, and to bring us freedom. And that for me is fantastic. And these guys that have gone before us in history, they've had some understanding of who Jesus was, the things that he did, that has inspired them, that has changed them, that has led them to say the things that they've said, which is amazing.